Chapter 7 of the Autobiography of an Indian Princess. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Autobiography of an Indian Princess by Maharani of Cooch Behar, Suniti Devi. Life at Cooch Behar. 8 days after I lost my father, I held a little daughter in my arms, and I wondered whether the innocent soul which had come into my keeping straight from God had met my father's noble spirits on its upward flight. Into that house of mourning, her birth brought some consolation. We named her Sukriti, or Good Deeds, but we always call her Girlie. She is fascinating, rather than lovely. When Rajay was 4 years old, as no other son had been born to us, the Maharaja's people were most anxious for him to marry again, for they said, if anything happened to the child, and the Maharaja also died, the throne would have to go to another branch of the family. The old Maharani and the late Kalika Das Dutt planned out very carefully that it was most necessary for my husband to marry again. The Maharaja never mentioned the matter to me, but to the doctor he said, when Rajay once had an attack of false croup, Durgadas, I shall always be over-anxious about Rajay's health until another son is born. So it was a day of great rejoicing when my second son, Jitendra, whom we call Jit, was born, 20th December, 1886. I was greatly delighted when I went to live at Cooch Behar to find there a fine church of the new dispensation and a girls' school named after me, but there was much room for improvement in the country. Although government had well prepared the way for us, it remained for my husband to be a ruler in the highest sense of the word, and for me to win the hearts of our people as a woman, a wife and a mother. The more I saw of Cooch Behar, the more I liked it. The old tales say that the god Shiva chose it as his earthly home on account of its luxuriant loveliness. Many legends have gathered round Cooch Behar, mostly of the time when it formed part of the kingdom of Kamrup, and when many of the temples and palaces were built. Among the stories is that of a Maharaja of Cooch Behar who had a number of wives, one of whom was a very pretty girl. She was the favorite wife, and the others were very jealous of her. The Prime Minister had a very handsome son, who, when walking one day in the palace gardens, looked up and caught sight of her beautiful eyes looking out of a window of the palace. He gazed at the lovely face, and the girl, who had never seen any man except her husband, stared back at him. The young man thought he had never seen any one so beautiful, and in the days that followed, he often came to the garden. Unfortunately, some of the ladies of the palace saw him looking at the little Maharani in the window. It did not take long for the Maharaja to learn this, and he promised the wife who told him a handsome present if she had spoken the truth. One day, when the romantic pair were thus engaged in gazing at each other from a distance, the Maharaja saw them. Naturally, though unjustly, he suspected his wife's fidelity. He sent a message to the Prime Minister, commanding him to dine at the palace that evening. The Divan, as he believed greatly honored, accepted the invitation. After dinner, the Maharaja said, I have a present for you to take home. When he reached his house, the Prime Minister told his wife to open the parcel. Directly afterwards, he heard a terrible scream, and rushing into his wife's room, found her on the floor unconscious, with a half-open parcel which contained the head of his son. The Divan guessed at once what had happened. Without a word, he left his house just as he was, and started for Delhi, the capital of the Mughal Empire. Arrived there, he begged an audience, and when admitted to the presence of the emperor, he told him that Cooch Behar was one of the richest districts in India, and suggested he should try to conquer it. The emperor made several attacks on Cooch Behar, but the fort was so strong that each time his army was driven back from the place now known as Mughalhat. This story is only one of the many I have heard. Their trend is always the same. The members of my husband's ancient race have been brave soldiers, generous alike to friend and foe, and passionate lovers, and they have sought afar for their wives. I have often thought how uncharitable the general public are about the feelings of those in high places. Without knowing them well, without knowing their inner lives, the public have an unjust habit of writing and speaking unkindly of rulers and princes. Often the public will compare their own lives with the lives of their princes, a commoner's with a ruler's life. God has chosen one man to be a ruler, and others to be his subjects. It is unfair to judge hastily without knowing the divine object of each life. People who rashly judge often do grave injustice to those who have been called to a high station. When I first came to Cooch Behar, we lived in the old palace, which was like a town. Hundreds of ladies occupied the various houses of which it was composed. The late Maharaja's wives, his mother and grandmother, and many relations, with all their servants. Whenever there were festivities, all these ladies gathered together, and it was like a great crowd in a small city. Now we live in the new palace, which is considered one of the finest in India. It was designed by a Western architect and is built in an eclectic style. It boasts a fine darbar hall, and the east front consists of a range of arcades along the ground and narrow piers, and the cement and terracotta used in the construction make an effective decoration. On one side of the palace is the swimming bath and covered racket and tennis courts. The gardens are lovely. There is a river on the west, a town towards the east, and to the north, in the far distance, stand the great Himalayas, like a fort. In the winter months, on clear days, we can see the snow distinctly. In the spring, flowers bloom everywhere, and as for fireflies, although I have travelled far, I have never seen so many thousands together. On dark nights, they look like little stars twinkling in the fields. During the rains, all the rivers, of which there are many, are in flood, and then I think of Cooch Behar as something like Venice. The thunderstorms at times are terrific. Our old nurse, Mrs. Eldridge, used to say, "In all my travels, I have never experienced such thunderstorms." We had English nurses for all our children, except Rajay. I was highly amused at Mrs. Eldridge's surprise when she first came. I asked her why she appeared to be so interested in me, and received this blunt reply: "Well, Your Highness, when I came to take up my duties with you, I expected to find a stout, dark, uneducated lady. I must say, now that I've seen you, I'm so taken aback that I can hardly believe my eyes." My day was always much occupied. After my morning tea, the children often brought me flowers from the garden, and I used to make sketches of them, and this was the pleasure and pride of my life. After my bath, I put on a silk sari, which is supposed to be sacred, and arranged the prayer room. I loved the effect of the masses of roses, jasmine, and the bright-hued flowers against the white marble of the altar and floor. The open windows admitted the sweet air, fresh from the river close by. I prepared the fruits and sweets for the household, and have often prepared enough vegetables for 50 people. My readers may perhaps smile at the idea of a Maharani cutting vegetables. I used to sit on the floor, surrounded by the brass bowls in which the vegetables were washed, and the maids constantly changed the water for me. I always cut enough vegetables to fill several large plates, for we generally had 18 curries of each meal. I also used to slice betel nut, which has to be cut very fine, and sometimes filled several big jars at one time. Often I made sweets, as both my husband and the children were fond of sweets. I also prepared pickles of mangoes and potatoes and other vegetables. All this I had learned to do from my dear mother. Sometimes I used to make up betel leaves into tiny odd-shaped packets filled with half a dozen different spices and pinned together with cloves. Perhaps most English readers do not know what a valuable digestive the betel leaf is. It strengthens the gums and completely neutralizes the bad effects of indigestible delicacies. Sometimes the Maharaja came in while I was cutting the vegetables, and he would sit and watch me, occasionally saying, "Take care, you will cut yourself," just as though I were a little girl who did not know how to peel a potato. Now and again I would get up tableaux and plays to amuse my relations-in-law, the officers' wives and others, and these they seemed to enjoy greatly. I was very fond of painting, and often spent hours ornamenting the mantelpieces and the glass panes in the doors. We made a miniature garden, which the children loved. In this garden we had a tank filled with clear water, in which one day my second son, the present Maharaja, then a little boy, wanted to have a bath. We tried to dissuade him, but he insisted on having his own way, so we undressed him and put him in the tank. He felt the cold but pretended he was quite warm, and he looked like a picture with only his face and curly head showing above the water in the little tank surrounded by flowers. From the day of his accession to the throne, the Maharaja devoted all the earnestness of his nature and his great powers of organization to plans for the comfort, well-being and education of his subjects. New roads were made, the systematic development of the resources of the state was undertaken, and hospitals, schools and public buildings were erected. Some of these are very fine. The Masonic Lodge in Cooch Behar is one of the largest in Bengal. The Maharaja took a keen interest in questions of education and founded a college of which he was very proud. At a distribution of prizes at this college on one occasion, he said, "If I find any boys guilty of disloyalty, they shall be turned out of the state in 24 hours. Hindu princes are allowed to marry as many wives as they wish, but the Maharanis are part of the state, and there is a vast difference between their position and that of the other palace ladies. The rulers' wives are brought to the palace as little girls, there to be married and afterwards educated, solely, I am obliged to admit, with the idea of attracting their husband, who more often than not never sees half of them. Nevertheless, the pretty ones learn to sing, dance and cook to perfection, for in many palaces the Maharaja's food is never touched by paid cooks. Some keep accounts, all are busy with their work, and my mother-in-law told me they are quite happy. Some of my readers may have heard that any girl may become a Raja's wife. This is absolutely untrue. The Maharanis must be young girls of good family, and always are. The Raja's wives are not allowed to go out to other houses. It may be my weakness or my strength, but I have altered my position in this respect a little. I do see people if urged, but I have often been asked by my husband's relations to remember who I am, and not to speak to any and everybody, and lower my position. My mother-in-law was a well-built woman, rather short but wonderfully strong. She was bright and always full of fun. Her kind help made my life a happy one, and her wise counsel often guided me in hours of difficulty when I first went to Cooch Behar after my marriage. She died of cholera at Woodlands. Raje, a cousin of mine, and I nursed her through her last illness. The Maharaja had a step-brother and sister, both very handsome. They were very devoted to my dear husband, especially the sister. There is a custom in the palace that no one shall have a meal before the Maharaja. For a few years I kept up this custom strictly, but sometimes, when I was in indifferent health, I found it difficult to wait until 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon for my breakfast. The Maharaja came to know of this and asked me why I did not have my breakfast earlier. When he heard of the custom, he said to his mother, "The Maharani cannot possibly wait so long. She is to have her meals before me if I am delayed." His mother did not like this at all, but as it was a command she had to obey. We do not have many meals in India. Formerly we had breakfast, fruit and milk every afternoon, and dinner. Now we have quite a late breakfast in the English way, and afternoon tea. Until I left India, I had never tasted meat. Our delicious fruits would convert the most ardent meat lover into a fruitarian. How I love Cooch Behar, with its abundance of birds and flowers. The scenery is glorious. The beautiful lotus covers the rivers, and at some of the old religious festivals, the temples are lavishly decorated with the gorgeous pink blossoms. The Cooch Behar climate is splendid. The winters are like those of the south of France, and the spring is heavenly. I endeavoured from the first to gain the confidence and affection of my husband's subjects, and never knowingly ran counter to their prejudices. In Darjeeling and Calcutta, I may be considered the Maharani with advanced Western views, but in Cooch Behar, I was and am the Zanana lady who enters into the lives of the people. Many who at first looked upon my marriage with disfavour took me to their hearts when they found that I was just like all their Maharanis and that I loved them. Now, when I feel that earthly happiness and myself have parted company, I like to picture Rajay as he was in those days. He had large sad eyes, lovely curling hair, and he grew into a straight-limbed, slender boy, beautiful as the legendary sons of Shiva. In January 1884, soon after we lost my father, we went to Shimla. There Rajay sickened with typhoid fever and became seriously ill, and the doctors and attendants declared the case to be hopeless. My husband's distress was terrible, and I shall never forget his anguished words. If God will only spare Rajay's life, Suniti, you and I would give our lives for him. Our prayers were answered. After 6 weeks' fight with death, our child was restored to us. Rajay's nature was always sweetly unselfish, even as a little boy. When I used to tell him stories, the sad parts always made him cry. How do rulers get their money? He asked me one day. Well, Rajay, by taxing people. Shall I be a ruler? Yes, darling, I hope you will some day. Then, he announced, his great eyes shining, I'll never ask for any taxes until everybody is well off and quite able to pay. Once I met him laden with all his boots and shoes. Rajay, where are you going? I asked. I was told that one of his servants had informed the boy that he was too poor to buy shoes for his children, and the kind little Rajay had straightway started off to remedy the trouble. Rajay was loyal to a degree. His creed was, once a friend, always a friend. He never went back after he had extended the hand of friendship to anyone. In later years, he was often deceived by those he trusted and belittled by those who had received innumerable kindness from him. But I never once heard him speak unkindly. His loyalty forbade it, and although he must have been wounded, he suffered in silence. I remember another incident of those early days. Rajay was hit by his bearer, an act which made everyone indignant, and immediately reported to me. My husband, who never permitted any one to touch the children, told one of the officers to question the bearer, and the man flatly denied having laid a finger on Rajay. I know the boy never tells a lie, remarked the Maharaja. Send for Rajay, and I will ask him. The child came in, and my husband said quietly, Now, were you beaten? No answer. Rajay, tell me the truth. There's a dear boy. Still no answer. Rajay, do you hear me speaking? Again, no reply. Well then, said my husband, go and stand in the corner until you tell me if the bearer hit you. Rajay obeyed and occupied the corner, the tears rolling down his cheeks, but he refused to tell about the offender. And I believe my husband loved the boy all the more because of his loyal but misplaced affection for his servant. On another occasion, when our English secretary's boys were fighting, and the younger was getting the worst of the struggle, Rajay cried, Stop! It's not fair. Nobody ought to hit a boy smaller than himself. He had a strong sense of justice, and his father was his ideal. Whatever my husband did was right in the eyes of his firstborn. No one was so wonderful, nor so good as his father. Our doctor once said, Rajay, I am taller than your father. You dare say that? The child answered in furious tones. Nobody in the world can possibly be taller than my father. Rajay was, even when a small boy, impressed with the sense of the responsibilities whose destiny it is to govern others. He seemed to realize the hollowness of earthly state, and he never tired of listening to one of our stories, which, like most Indian legends, has a striking moral. Its simple cynicism may interest my readers. Once, the souls of the poor were standing in front of the closed gates of heaven. Since they parted from their bodies, They had patiently spent many weary days hoping for admittance to the lovely country where the ills of life are forgotten. The horrors of their past lives had not yet faded from their minds, although in this place of waiting they were spared the pangs of poverty, hunger, and thirst. The vast multitude gazed yearningly at the gates which did not open. Suddenly, word came, make way, O souls! A rich Maharaja's spirit is on its way to heaven and must be instantly admitted." The poor murmured together, but again the gatekeeper spoke, and the crowd parted to give place to the soul of the Maharaja. At last it came, and the poor caught a glimpse of the pomp and circumstance which attended its passage to heaven. The gates were flung open, and the perfumed air of paradise came forth for an instant, but the poor remained outside. "Ah," cried the weary spirits, "is existence still to be the same for us as it was when we lived upon earth? There the rich always oppressed us. We were as dust under their feet. We toiled that they might have the luxuries they demanded. And now that we are dead, we still suffer. Why should we not be admitted to heaven without delay? Alas, there is no justice at the hands of God, since the soul of a Maharaja but lately dead takes precedence of us." "Oh, silence, rebellious ones!" cried the gatekeeper. Surely you know that the road to heaven is an easy one for the poor to traverse. You have no temptations in your passage save the ills of poverty. You have not to combat with the lust of the eye, with the arrogance of riches, with the evil wrought by flattering tongues and the misuse of power. Think what allurements this ruler must have resisted in order to prepare himself for heaven. It is a stupendous feat for a Maharaja to have accomplished. And, added the gatekeeper unctuously, we seldom see them here. Therefore, it behoves me to give instant admittance to such a rare arrival." And the souls of the poor were silent, for they recognized the words of wisdom which the gatekeeper had spoken. End of chapter 7.